We are wrapping up our series on Daniel tonight. So far in the series, we have looked at 3 different stories that had to do with Daniel. The first one we talked about, Daniel chapter 1. And we looked at the fact that even though we live a life that is honoring to God, and we do what God has called us to do, we still end up in hard situations. And we end up in those hard situations sometimes because that's where we have to be to do the work God has called us to do. Then we looked at, I think it was Daniel chapter 2, and we looked at this situation where the king put this huge demand, this impossible hard demand on Daniel, and had this incredibly ridiculous consequence thrown into it. And on his own, it was completely impossible. But it was only impossible if he was trying to do it on his own. Because with God, it was very much possible. And then last week we looked at another story of Daniel, and we asked, it was a story about him being thrown in the lion's den and him continuing to pray even though he was threatened. And we discovered that Daniel decided to live his life by putting his commitments before any opposition that came in. Well, tonight we're going to look at Daniel chapter 9. And Daniel chapter 9 isn't so much a story of something that happened to Daniel as it is something that Daniel did. As a pastor, as being in the ministry, you have a lot of opportunity to see, how do I word this? A lot of dumb things. You have the chance and the opportunity and the privilege of getting to know people and watching people and seeing people make a lot of really stupid decisions. A lot of really ridiculous changes, and end up in some pretty crazy messes. And some of these people you're close to, some of these people you're not close to, but it just seems like you're constantly surrounded by situations that they're just hard to watch. For example, just give you some general examples. Families that are constantly stuck in poverty because they keep making the same stupid financial decisions over and over and over again. God gives them an opportunity, somebody gives them an opportunity, and they waste it and they end up in the same situation. There's girls and sometimes guys that have self-esteem issues or baggage or whatever it is, and they keep looking for their worth in a relationship, and so they get into a relationship and it falls apart, and they get into another relationship and it falls apart, and they get into another relationship and it falls apart, and the cycle keeps going, and every time you see them, they got a new person on their arm. And over and over and over again, they just end up in these situations. You think, you guys probably know somebody that it's probably a friend you're fairly close with. You try to give them advice, and they won't take it. And then they end up in a mess, and then they end up depressed, and then they end up wondering if they should end their life, and then they'll end up all right, and you'll give them advice, and they'll ignore the advice, and it happens all over again. And it's just hard to watch. There are people that are depressed, and you try to help them out, and they can't get the jobs that they want to get. Do you guys understand what I'm talking about? There are lots of hard situations around us. And it's hard because it's not happening to us, it's happening to somebody, and it's hard to watch. Daniel Daniel dealt with being in that same situation we are. As we've mentioned in the previous weeks, Daniel was an Israelite. And he was in the country he was in Babylon, because Babylon had invaded Israel, destroyed it, and taken him and many other of the citizens captive. And Daniel was a slave. We haven't talked much about what led up to that situation, though. God had chosen Israel to do an incredible work in the world, in history. And God said, He promised them that He would take care of them and He would protect them as long as they followed Him. And so they followed Him for a while, and then they decided that they wanted to follow other gods and other ideas. And so God let them be attacked. And then He would save them. And they would get back on the right track, and they would follow Him, and then a little while later, they would decide to follow somebody else. And they would get destroyed, and they would get attacked, and God would protect them. And this went on for years and years and years, hundreds of years of Him warning them ignoring Him, and then them dealing with the consequences. And I got to the point that God said, this is it, guys. If you do not turn away from your sin, if you do not turn away from your idolatry, if you do not turn away from the way you've been living, I am going to send a foreign nation to come and destroy you and send you into exile for 70 years. They didn't do anything. They ignored the warning. They ignored everything. They continued to sin. They continued to be idolatrous. And the Babylonians came in, wiped them out, stole the people, and spread them all across the world so that there wouldn't be any problem. And so Daniel comes out of that situation, and he grows up and he becomes a very important person in Babylon. And one day he's reading the ancient scrolls, and he reads the book of Jeremiah. And this is what it says in Daniel chapter 9, starting at verse 3. After reading the book of Jeremiah, I turned my face to the Lord God, seeking Him in prayer, with pleas for mercy, with fasting and sackcloth and ashes. I prayed to the Lord my God and made confession, saying, O Lord, the great and awesome God, who keeps covenant and steadfast love with those who love Him and keep His commandments. We have sinned and done wrong and acted wickedly and rebelled, turning aside from your commandments and rules. We have not listened to your servants, the prophets, who spoke in your name to our kings, our princes, and our fathers, and to all the people of the land. Now, before we go any further, I have a question to ask. Why does he say we? Verse 5. We have sinned and done wrong and acted wickedly. Did Daniel have anything to do with the exile? Is there anything in the book of Daniel that would lead us to believe that he was a sinful man? Is there anything in the book of Daniel that would lead us to believe that he was rebellious to God? Is there anything in the book of Daniel, or even logically, that would lead us to believe that Daniel had anything to do with 400 years of sin before he was born? So why is he saying we? We have sinned and rebelled, turning aside from your commandments and rules. Let's keep going. Verse 7. To you, O Lord, belongs righteousness, but to us open shame, as at this day to the men of Judah, to the inhabitants of Jerusalem, to all Israel, those who are near and those who are far away, in all the lands to which you have driven them, because of the treachery that they have committed against you. To us, O Lord, belongs open shame, to our kings, to our princes, and to our fathers, because we have sinned against you. To the Lord our God belongs mercy and forgiveness, for we have rebelled against him, and have not obeyed the voice of the Lord our God by walking in his laws, which he set before us by his servants the prophets. All Israel has transgressed your law and turned aside, refusing to obey your voice. And the curse and oath that are written in the law of Moses, the servant of God, have been poured out upon us, because we have sinned against him. He has confirmed his words, which he spoke against us and against our rulers who ruled us, by bringing upon us a great calamity. For under the whole heaven there has not been done anything like that has been done against Jerusalem. As it is written in the law of Moses, all this calamity has come upon us, yet we have not entreated the favor of the Lord our God, turning from our iniquities and gaining insight by your truth. Therefore the Lord has kept ready the calamity and has brought it upon us. For the Lord our God is righteous in all the works that he has done, and we have not obeyed his voice. And now, O Lord our God, you brought your people out of the land of Egypt with a mighty hand, and have made a name for yourself, as at this day we have sinned, we have done wickedly. O Lord, according to your righteousness, let your anger and your wrath turn away from your city, Jerusalem, your holy hill. Because of our sins and for the iniquities of our fathers, Jerusalem and your people have become a byword people among all who are around us. Now therefore, our God, listen to the prayer of your servant and to his pleas for mercy, and for your own sake, make your face to shine upon your sanctuary. My God, incline your ear and hear. Open your eyes and see your desolations, and the city that is called by your name. For we do not present our pleas before you because of our righteousness, but because of your great mercy. O Lord, hear. O Lord, forgive. O Lord, pay attention and act. Delay not for your own sake, O my God, because your city and your people are called by your name. Why is he saying we? Why isn't he saying, God, forgive my fathers. God, forgive my fathers and ignore them and make it right. And God, have your wrath upon all those who sinned and build your righteousness and build your kingdom on people like me. Why is he saying that? Why isn't he saying that? Daniel understood another principle. Daniel understood that we are not called to judge. We are called to intercede. We are not called to judge. We are called to intercede. Now, this is what I mean by judge. I do not mean be able to tell what's right and what's wrong. Okay? That's discern. We have to be discerning. We have to be able to tell what's right and what's wrong. We have to look at a situation and be able to discern what's right and what's wrong. That is something we need to do. When the Bible uses the word judge, you could probably, in most situations, fit in the word condemn. We are not called to condemn other people. We are not called to look at other people and say, that's what you did, you sealed your fate, live with it. This is the situation you're in. I don't want to look at you, but you got to deal with it yourself because you put yourself into this mess. Good luck. You're in a hard place. You won't take my advice. Glad I'm not you. We are not called to judge. We are called to intercede. And what I mean by intercede is to take other people's burdens and problems and sins on as if they were your own. That's what Daniel is doing when he says, we have sinned. He's not looking down with some kind of self-righteous platform saying, you know what, they have sinned, God forgive them. No, he's saying we have sinned. We've made these mistakes. We've done these things. I am with them, and I am begging you to forgive us. Daniel is in the place where he is actually with those who have messed up and made things as terrible as they are, and he is saying, forgive us, because we have sinned, and he is putting himself with them so that he can then beg and plead on their behalf. To intercede is to take their burden on yourself as if it is your own. We're not called to judge, we're called to intercede. How it would change if when we saw people who were in the hard situations, we stopped looking at them and saying, well, you're in this situation because. Or when we were talking to the people around us, we said, well, they're in this situation because. But we actually changed and said, we've made some bad choices. We're in a tough spot. We've made some mistakes. That family over there that keeps making the bad financial decisions, how would it change if you started praying, forgive us for the bad financial decisions we have made? Forgive us for being selfish. Forgive us for ignoring your commands. Change our hearts. You looked at the friend that was always ignoring your advice, and instead of looking down with a matter of judgment, a matter of condemnation, and saying they just don't get it, they'll never get it, they never understand it, and saying, God, you got to wake them up. God, you got to wake them up. You start saying, God, we are stuck. We are making bad decisions. We need you to intervene in our lives. And instead of praying for them, you prayed with them on their behalf and carried their burdens to Christ as if they were your very own. It becomes very difficult to judge anyone when you pray that way. It becomes very difficult to be prideful when you pray that way. And it becomes very difficult for the enemy to gain any ground in their lives or in yours when you pray that way. Daniel set an example throughout his life, from the time of his first captivity to the very end of his life, when he was reading the book of Jeremiah and he sat down and he prayed. He showed us what holiness is. He gave us an example to follow. And as we look at people who are in difficult situations that we don't want to watch, sometimes we don't want to know about it, we don't want to be a part of it, we need to stop judging them. and start interceding for them. Don't judge. Intercede. And so that family or that friend or that person that you're thinking of, you need to start praying for them, not for them, but for us. And as you go through your week, as you hear about other people and you hear about other situations, and you think about, man, they're in a tough spot, or man, they just don't get it. Don't judge. Don't condemn. Intercede. Take all that passion for the righteousness, all that truth that you feel, take that and don't just leave it at they're wrong and I'm right, and turn it into a passion to seek God on their behalf with them. Don't judge. Intercede.